think we are all underestimating the power of AI.
If we need fewer people to do the same work, what work do the additional people do? Only 1 in 4, for example, management graduates is employable. This gap in employability is wider than it's ever been. Is there a way that as mentors we can become better?
Mentors can't teach.
आपको जो करना है आप कर सकते हो, कुछ भी कर सकते हो, right? That on one end is very empowering, but also very scary. And I think not make a big deal about setbacks. Like one of the things they say is that every failure doesn't have to be a LinkedIn post.
I'm very curious where there was dissonance or conflict between the two of you all, because it couldn't have been so straightforward that you agreed on everything.
Marriage made in heaven.
Hello everybody, we are here at the Altera Institute for another insightful conversation into the world of brands and businesses. Today we have with us two very esteemed leaders from the world of corporate. Mr. Sunder Ramachandran brings with him 2 decades of diverse experience across healthcare, technology and financial services. He's also been an entrepreneur for 5 years. Currently, he is the Senior Vice President and the Head of Transformation and Commercial Excellence at Dr. Reddy's Labs. Mr. Vivek Gambhir has 3 decades of senior leadership experience across many industries like consumer goods, consulting and investing. A graduate of Harvard Business School, he was one of the founding team members of Bain & Company in India, served as a managing director for Godrej Consumer Products, and was the CEO of Boat Lifestyle. Welcome, Sundar and Vivek.
Our pleasure. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you, Aalekh.
The first question, of course, that is on my mind, and I'm sure the viewers, is you've had really heavyweight careers, which we know about. What prompted you to sort of, in addition to your active careers, invest almost 2 years on a book for young professionals?
I think, it became quite clear as we were sort of rising through, our careers that, look, there's a lot of appetite for career advisory. Usually when we would do commercial or business reviews, outside of that, every conversation invariably turned out to be a career conversation.
Right.
And then when we looked at the advisory that's out there, we felt there's a gap between what is being provided online versus the realities of navigating careers in a real environment. So we thought, there's value for us to bring our lived experience, codify some of the mistakes, some of the lessons we've learned, and then really help the next generation of leaders thrive. So that was the anchor, that was the motivation that sort of got us together and, enabled us to sort of get onto this hobby horse and which eventually resulted in the book. So, yeah.
Right. The counter to that is, look, there's so much content today, right? A bit different from when I started the career, definitely different from when you guys started your careers. There's so much content out there that is aimed at helping young professionals navigate their professional choices, etc. In this landscape, what gap areas did you feel that your book still needs to exist to solve for? Because there's so much on YouTube and Instagram.
The one obviously is the benefit of lived experience, right? Collectively, we have about 55 years of work experience.
Right.
And we've had plenty of stumbles on the way. So in that sense, we felt like we had a point of view which was based on some of the lessons that we've learned and some of the mistakes we've made. But we didn't think that was enough. And so one of our starting steps was we had focus groups with almost 100 Gen Z professionals, just to better understand from them what are some of the challenges that they are dealing with.
Yeah.
And we didn't want this just to be a book based on only our learnings. We tried to bring in stories from lots of entrepreneurs, people in large companies, so that they could also share some of their stories. And then we've tried to make it as actionable as possible. Every section ends with something we call Monday morning actions, which are things people can start implementing right away. So it's a combination of lived experiences, lots of stories and wisdom from other people who've been through this journey, along with trying to make it as practical as possible. Hoping that combination is the secret sauce here.
Tell me, during this research, what insight or challenge that the young professionals are facing surprised you the most, which you wouldn't have guessed before diving into this world?
I think, we had a sense of it because obviously, we're dealing with young people, we've got kids, so you're seeing this play out at home, but also the whole paradox of choices, right? Where like we say in business, more is always not great.
Yeah.
Right? So the whole idea to say, well, today, young people are empowered to say, as we say in Hindi, right? आपको जो करना है आप कर सकते हो, कुछ भी कर सकते हो, right? That on one end is very empowering, but also very scary. Because now you're like, oh, I can do anything? What is that thing that I want to do now? right? So really the ability to narrow down from that consideration set to say, what is it that I'm going to be good at is now a meaningful and difficult question. So I think just how can we help the next gen of leaders really narrow down that set to something that's more comprehensible for them, right? Was the big surprise, and that's what we try to do through the book as well. So.
Right. Building on the paradox of choice, of course, there's a spectrum because on the one hand, there definitely are a lot more career options for young professionals to start with. On the other, there are enough studies that do share that only 1 in 4, for example, management graduates is employable in today's landscape. Having been on the industry side, you would have recruited hundreds and thousands of people. Now, having interacted with students and young professionals, do you have a hypothesis on why this gap in employability per se is wider than it's ever been?
I think the result here is the reason for this is that so much of the interviewing process has been fairly broken, right? Which focuses far more on technical skills and what schools people have been to, right? And what pedigree they come from. And what we have realized at the end of the day is while technical skills are important, things such as ability to solve problems, communication skills, how you work in a team, how you manage your boss, how do you figure out your career transitions, these aspects tend to be far, far more important. But generally, because employers have focused far more on technical skills, less on the softer skills, which is a lot more about attitude, learning agility. I think that's the reason why many times you end up hiring the wrong people because you are actually focusing on what probably are easier to measure, which is the scores you've achieved previously, and not focusing on truly those drivers which drive to longer term success.
But I think if I can just add to that, Aalekh, I think what we're also saying is now the true currency of engagement, employability is becoming skills, which I think is great for young professionals graduating now or thinking about entering business schools, because now you have a real opportunity to say, hey, if I can hone my craft is my ticket. Right? If I can learn my domain, if I can be really good at whatever it is that I'm trying to prepare myself for, that becomes my calling card. My brand and my know-how, my skill set is far more powerful than the affiliation to a school that I may or may not have gone to. And I think that's superb for everyone who's coming out today.
No, that's super interesting, Sundar, because what we're essentially saying is that students on one side need to focus on the right set of skills to build, and companies, in addition to the technical skills, also need to look at markers of success. So I like to call them, right? On how do we do that? This, while it's broad-based and true, you've worked in many different types of organizations. So if you just take 3 broad buckets, say a large product-led MNC like say Dr. Reddy's or Godrej Consumer that you've led, a services-based firm like a Bain & Company or a Lightspeed, and a digital-first company like a Boat, right? Is the same set of behaviors and skill sets applicable across the board, or do you believe that one needs to mold very early on, depending on the type of organization that they're about to join?
The starting step is very important, right? Because each of these companies will have a very different context to start with. So ultimately, the skills, the basic skills may tend to be the same. But if you're working in a startup, right, you need to know how to thrive in chaos. And you need to enjoy being in an unstructured environment, right? If you're the kind of person who enjoys a lot more structure, perhaps a large company might be a better place to start. So I think the starting point and the context would be the same, but generally there are different avatars of the same skill, right? So for example, if you are learning how to do marketing, right? The context of marketing might be different. The focus on performance marketing might be higher in one situation than brand marketing, but the fundamentals of marketing would be similar. How you know which muscles to flex is the learning one needs to be able to acquire. And I think, Aalekh, the challenge, as I'm sure you are dealing with also, is that perhaps there's a paradigm shift happening versus employers actually requiring more specialist skills now, right? And that becomes the ticket of entry. So there's a lot of pressure on just pure generalist programs, and which is where someone like you becomes very important, because employers today don't have the patience to say, I'll spend 2 years training you, right? I want someone to come in who actually has ready-made skills. The key is those skills might change over time. So you need to know how to solve problems, you need to have learning agility, but the requirement to actually be a specialist is becoming higher than ever before, I think.
And if I can just add a point there, look, I think sometimes, and we've made this mistake as well, right? One of our recommendations for young professionals is please don't become a prisoner of your own narrative or story, right? Oftentimes we tell ourselves, oh, you know what? I'm the kind of person who's going to thrive in a hustle environment. I'm the kind of person who prefers structure. There's nothing like that. Become less judgmental. These are skills. Everything is very useful till it's not. You can be super hustler, and there'll be a time where structure, processes, sophistication is the need of the hour. You can be very structured, and there are times when, over-indexing on any one thing is not useful. The whole and framework is useful. It's not either or. So at least at the start of your career, you don't want to dismiss yourself by saying, oh, I'm this type of an industry person. Work for a product company, work for a services company if the opportunity comes, work for a big company, small company, startup, because the combination is where value creation happens.
Yeah, but who has the patience for that, Sundar? You've said we'll work for 4 different types of sectors. That's there's another truism that says you should spend 2 years in a role. That's 8 years of one's career gone. Do you think that the young professionals today have that kind of patience?
Average careers will last for 40 or 50 years. Think about, right? The average span of a career, right? We obviously are very impatient and we all want results in 2 or 3 years. But, and we talk in the book about being a marathon runner, right? If you truly believe that a career is going to be 40 years at a minimum or not 50, it's so important to actually play the long game and ensure that our skill sets are relevant. Most of our careers will go through multiple phases. I had 12 years of a phase working in consulting, 12 years working in a large company, and the last few years has been actually working with founders. So in my career itself, I've seen 3 very distinct phases, and each phase has actually been more than a decade long.
And think about it, right? I mean, this conversation is a great example. You've spent a decade. I've spent a couple of decades. Vivek spent 3 decades, right? We're all of us are in active careers as we speak, right? We've written the book. This doesn't mean that, we put our feet up on the table, right? So it's almost the analogy that I use is, look, have we figured out everything there is to figure out about careers? Of course, the answer is no, right? I think this is all about, flying the plane as you build it. Careers are work in progress, right? We're still making mistakes. We will continue to make mistakes in the future. The idea is to say there's no one particular point. So if that framing becomes easier, then, the question that you had asked about, hey, am I too early? Am I too late? Should I be doing it for 2 years? The moment you have a 30-year time frame, everything falls in place.
Absolutely. If we just think about it over a 40-year career, even if we spend 8 years trying to figure it out, it's just 20%. Those 8 years might seem like a really long time, and they are.
And you're still doing something during those 8 years, right? It's not idle time. So that
I
has
think
its
the
value.
ability to zoom out is definitely something that's rare, but equally meaningful. Which actually gets me to ponder. You mentioned that I've spent about a decade in industry, you about closer to 2 decades, and sir, you've spent 3 decades. What are some of the truisms, 2 parts to the question, what are some of the truisms that are definitely applicable to all of us, including somebody who's starting his or her career today? And what is something that maybe we oldies need to unlearn in the context of today's industry?
I think the truism, the 6 sections in the book are actually a codification of what the truisms are, right? It was as important when Vivek and I started to be a learner. I think it's as or more important today. We were working in teams, collectively solving problems, continues to be important today. That's going to be hot 5 years down the line, right? Your ability to manage the landscape, what we call manage up, important before, important today. Your ability to deliver results, because at the end of the day, you get hired to deliver commercial outcomes, right? So the ability to get things done, very useful. The ability to have long-range planning. Be tactical, take your short steps, but know that you're not running, you're not going anywhere in a hurry, right? So being a marathon runner. So I think the 6 sections that we've drawn out in the book in a way are based on fundamental truths, skills that will continue to remain hot, continue to give you an ROI in times to come. I think the mistake probably that I see is a little bit of, we tend to other the different generation. It's a little bit of us versus them. So how could we be more inclusive? Number one. How could we be less judgmental about the generations and value them for what they bring to the table? So as long as we are okay with them being vocal, as long as we're okay with them not maybe adhering to the traditional norms of respect and hierarchy that we are all used to, so much of value unlock that can happen. So what we need to unlearn is judgments, preconceived notions, and some of these narratives about, oh, millennials are this, Gen Z is this, sometimes end up doing more bad than good, right? They end up narrowing your point of view, and it's never useful to approach a generation with a certain lens and say, oh, you're millennial, so I'm going to make some assumptions about you anyway. So
in line with what you mentioned about the changing landscape and the curiosity, one of the most obvious things that's causing the landscape shift is the advent of AI and language models, right? Never before has it been so easy to get to mimic, right? To ape. You can write a very, very professional email today without having undergone a communications course. You can prepare beautiful data dashboards without knowing how to use a function on Excel, right? In light of this, are there any behaviors that younger professionals you would advise to adopt, which maybe wasn't so important earlier?
I think we are all underestimating the power of AI. And we don't know exactly which way it will lend itself towards, right? But fundamentally, I think learning how to work with AI and finding this human plus AI model is extremely, extremely important for everyone, because regardless of what industry you are in, regardless of what function you are in, there is going to be an impact of AI. And what's more important for people is to be able to develop what a lot of folks are calling fusion skills. And there are 3 different parts of it. One is what I would say is called intelligent interrogation. So how do you know what to ask AI to be able to actually serve you? The second is judgment interrogation, which is again, AI will not always get things right. So do you know what the context is, and do you have the judgment to know when AI is right and when AI is wrong? And then the third is what's called reciprocal apprenticing, which is you have to teach AI. Right? If you don't teach AI the right way, you will get the wrong results. But the biggest skill set for people is to be able to find a way to fuse these 3 different things. And that ultimately comes back to, again, problem solving. Whether it's generative AI today, whether it is, agentic AI after a few years, who knows? But if we can find a way to leverage AI, learn AI, it's extremely important, because it is going to have an impact on regardless of what we want to do.
So all of the things, Vivek, that you mentioned in terms of the use of AI, and it's difficult to imagine that we are underestimating the impact because it's already such a hype. But say we are, and we are underestimating the impact of AI. All of the impact on work life is anti-headcount, so to speak, which means that you need fewer people to do the same job, which is great for investors, which is great for people who are running P&Ls like yourselves, because you can cut headcount. What impact does that have, in your opinion, on the employment landscape? Because if we need fewer people to do the same work, what work do the additional people do?
I think this answer will evolve. Honestly, no one quite knows, right? A lot of jobs which are more routine lend itself to very high levels of automation. But as that goes on, I think there will be a new category of jobs that will get created. Look, when the computer started, the same concerns were there, right? When the internet started, the same concerns were there about the amount of jobs that would actually end up getting lost. Some jobs will definitely disappear. I think in areas such as technical support, customer support, which can get automated. and we're already seeing the impact of conversational AI that's already impacting, and we really haven't gone into autonomous agents. There will definitely be certain sectors, certain industries that will see a bigger impact. But I'm still an optimist saying that over time, a new category of jobs will end up getting created. But those jobs will require us to leverage AI.
Yeah.
And that's my point, is that whether we like it or not, everything will have an AI impact. We need to learn how to leverage AI, but hopefully new jobs will also get created as a certain amount of jobs get lost. In the interim period, certainly job loss might be more than job creation or job gain. But I think over time, if you believe in the power of human progress, I see a new category of jobs getting created.
And can I just add to that, like Vivek painted the landscape really, really well, right? If you're a young person watching this, what does it mean? Because sometimes when you talk AI, you talk large language models, complex use cases within companies, it can, if you don't know it, it'll sound very esoteric, right? And you will get overwhelmed to say, what am I supposed to do? So let's break it down. If you're a young professional in a business school, graduating, or in the early stages of career, I think the tactical question you can ask yourself is, what's really good about AI is every single AI application that you see out there today has a consumer class version, right? Let's talk about on the creation side, on the curation side, on the distribution side, on the tracking and analysis side, which is your world of marketing. There's a consumer class version, more often than not free, right? So what's stopping you from going and playing with it? Right. And what that'll do is that'll build some fluency, that'll build an immersive appreciation. So the moment you enter the workforce and suddenly omni-channel marketing is being thrown at you, right? AI for marketing analytics is being thrown at you. This is not new. This is not some 10,000 feet above, because you said, oh, I get it. I've done it in my personal space. I've used some of it to do my own social media analytics. So I understand when this happens in the context of the product. Right. It's just more relatable. It's more value additive. I think if we just break it down into say, hey, what does it mean? What can I do today that gives me a better sense, takes me closer to the game? That's a nicer way to frame it and solve the problem in a real way.
I think the source of anxiety comes from the fact that it's very difficult to imagine what the new job landscape might be look like. As you said, that it'll be ever evolving. All of us are not that creative or imaginative to see what that landscape shift might cause. But this is not new. This same debate has happened when the internet was on the rise, when computers first and foremost were on the rise. That's saying, hey, now we have much lesser paperwork to do. What will all the people do who are today managing the paperwork and building accounts, right? Now that you have Tally, for example.
Industrial revolution.
Industrial revolution, right? We're moving from handmade textiles to factories. Well, now what will all these people do? In fact, there was a lot of pushback in large societies in the world in adopting industrial revolution as well. But now that you're on the investing side also, I'm sure you're seeing a lot of exciting businesses come up. Is there any example of an application of some of these new jobs or new problems that companies are working to solve, which was just not possible to think of 2-3 years ago before AI, which can give us some hope and some ability to imagine what the future might look like?
One of the companies Lightspeed's invested in is a company called Sarvam. Sarvam is trying to build the first, what they call sovereign AI model in the world. A lot of the existing large language models, first of all, are very expensive because they need very large data sets. And second of all, they are all being developed by the largest companies in the world, right? So there's always a bit of a risk that India could be left behind. Right. And how do you create the India ecosystem for AI? So Sarvam is actually building models that can be used by vernacular in India. Right. So their models, it operates in 11 Indian languages, and they're building it in small data sets, which are far more cost efficient to be able to be used. So I'm now starting to see again this approach saying, look, let's not rely on global models, because in many cases on the internet, right, we are using internet applications, but a lot of the internet's controlled by very, very large companies. And Sarvam is a great example of a company that's actually developing local models for sovereign India, for Bharat India.
That's super exciting again. And I think the problem statement that most of us are not even able to fathom the problem statement itself, which is that we need to have sovereign LLM. So that's very, very good.
And
to hear.
Aalekh, let me give you an example from your
Yes.
world of education and
Yes.
empowerment. Fractal Analytics, which is a company that many of us know about, has built a AI bot for coaching. Marshall Goldsmith, who's a very popular leadership coach, has written many classics. I think What Got You Here Won't Get You There, which is the most famous of his books. So there's actually an AI bot that's been built. It's called marshallgoldsmith.ai. And Fractal's built it. And what they've done is used a large language model, trained it on every single piece of narrative that Marshall's put there. Talks, podcasts, videos, written notes, books. He's written, I think, 7 or 8 of them. It's all there. And there's a video bot. So you can literally, and it's free. There's no commercial angle there. But I just bring that example to say, where is this moving? So every one of your students, us, can now go to marshallgoldsmith.ai, ask questions, and Marshall will answer. Career dilemmas, motivation, dealing with XYZ. That's today. This is not some future vision. The product is already available. Right. So if this is what the world of coaching, online empowerment looks like now, it obviously is safe to assume that it's going to get more immersive, more interactive, more engaging as we go forward, right?
And I think that that's very interesting, because what that essentially is decentralization of coaching, right? Which is, the two of you have obviously a lot of wisdom from your lived experiences to share with students and young professionals through your book, through your interactions with the students in colleges like ours. How do you think, as, for example, I am a mentor, right? I'm a mentor to the students here at Altera Institute and to mentors across the country. If we want to be better coaches and mentors to the people who are joining the workforce today, one of the things, of course, is that we have good intent. But we have very different lived experiences, very different to yours. Is there a way that as mentors we can become better at navigating, at empathizing with the generation, because you've spent now 2 years almost researching, spending time with these students and professionals?
Is to just be on that constant, keep your eyes and ears open, right? As much as we may think, I think the fundamental challenges aren't necessarily very different from what they've always been, right? Finding a good job, finding a meaningful career, striking a good equation with your boss, making sure that you're able to sleep well, right? Making sure that you've got some time for yourself to balance out other things that matter. Those are truisms that have stayed to be the course, right? So I think one is that. What mentors can do really well is to make sure that they're practicing what they preach, right? Yeah. They're also sort of experimenting with what's happening. So they're coming, they're constantly bringing that operational experience. I think where the gap comes in, and that's why, sometimes academics get dissed a little bit, right? Is sometimes you can live in your own world of theory and people find it difficult to then bridge that and say, well, how does it actually land? How does it apply in the real world? So as close you can be to what's happening on the ground, as close you can be to doing your own small experiments, then you are able to then translate that in a more tactical, tangible way, right? Because I think, and we say this in the book as well, right? With mentoring, what you got to be super careful about, it's not a Socrative model. Yeah. It's not about just asking thoughtful questions. Sometimes it's about saying, hey, 1, 2, 3, go do it. Yeah. But you need to have that, proximity and intimacy to the ground to be able to say that with confidence. So.
Right. And that all sounds logical, but if you have to institutionalize this, and the only way to do that is through education institutes, right? Because that's where the talent is preparing themselves to take on corporate careers, especially in management. If you talk about postgraduate programs in management, is there a systemic way? Vivek, you mentioned that there's a lot of focus on skills, but employers equally are looking for some of the other things as well. Is there a systemic way in which institutes can get better at preparing younger professionals to take on these challenges?
I hope that's what you are doing also here, right? So I think it's a portfolio approach. I don't think there is a one size fits all or a silver bullet. One has to, use mentoring, one has to use case studies, one has to use experiences, one has to use specific tools to be able to actually, equip the next generation to be ready for dealing with whatever opportunities and challenges that come their way. We can use technology in much smarter ways, but I don't think there's one single answer here. Mentoring can be a very important part of it, but ultimately, you want people to also feel much more self-motivated. You need to be, for them to be far more curious. You need them to be far more self-aware. And so mentors can't teach. Mentors can tell you what to do based on their experience, but mentors may not be able to actually tell someone on how to actually be curious. But a very energizing discussion in a classroom with a great faculty member sometimes opens people's eyes. And so I think, to me, it's about creating that portfolio and putting lots of different things in place. It's like, having a wonderful meal. Like, a wonderful meal needs great appetizers, it needs drinks, it needs the main course, it needs desserts, right? How do you put these things together? I think is really what a great business school like Altera can do.
Right. Now, what I understand from the process that you followed for your book is obviously pooled in together almost 5 decades of your experience and your lived experience as mentors, as leaders of really large organizations. I'm very curious where there was dissonance or conflict between the two of y'all, wherein you did not agree on a particular school of thought or a particular wisdom, because it couldn't have been so straightforward that you agreed on everything.
Marriage made in heaven.
No, look, I think, Vivek has articulated this before. I mean, look, writing a book is like putting a product out, right? In a way, it's sort of a mini venture of sorts, right? There are always differences. I think the key piece, and this became easier because both of us have been at the game, so we've sort of gone through the process and cadence. I think the key piece is to understand why you've come together in the first place. So what's the anchor? What's the key trigger for doing this? I think that clarity, the shared goal is super important. I think that's number one. Number two, having a cadence to say, how are you going to work through it? Because how do you take the idea from a concept to commission? So what is the check-in mechanisms going to look like? What is that cadence looking like? Three, operational principles where we disagree, right? So we had a clear view to say, hey, when obviously you have a different point of view versus mine, who's going to have the veto? What are we going to do to stress test some of the ideas? And then what are we going to eventually land with? And I think what also helps is an end goal, right? I mean, you're working with a big publisher, there's a timeline. Yeah. So beyond a point, you need to also then move beyond the drama and say, hey, this needs to get done. And that's true for a book, that's true for co-founding a company, that's true for, I think that enterprise view, that end view to say, we need to deliver by this timeline. So yeah, we can go back and forth, but this much, right? And then we need to sort of agree and move on. So I think that happened. Of course, there were pieces, because like I said, Vivek has this big picture. So just to give you one very tangible example, if it was up to me, we would have probably had only 5 sections in the book, and I would have finished at be a go-getter, don't be an asshole. That would have been the final section of the book. But given everything Vivek has seen, and he's obviously coached leaders and CEOs, he was very insistent that no, we need to have something about playing the long game, because that's what it's all about. And I'm so glad we had that, because now the book is so much more richer for it, because that's what it is. And we want to, through the book, give the message to the younger people that it's all right to make a few mistakes. It's all right to get in, like you said, even if you get 8 years, you get a couple of years off, you take a sabbatical, you do interesting things. In the longer scheme of things, it all checks out. Right? So don't get too worried about, I need to figure, like we were having a conversation with the students a little while back, and they were like, they want to get everything, they want to get their first step super right. Yeah. You say over-optimizing for what's going to happen in the next 6 months. Now, we're not saying don't be thoughtful about it. Be deliberate, be thoughtful. But if it so happens that it doesn't work out to be whatever it is that you dreamt of, it's all right, just keep moving.
Right. No, I think that's a very comforting thought for hundreds and thousands of young professionals, which is, if you just zoom out and say that I have 40 years ahead of me in the career, then small setbacks are not as disconcerting as they otherwise.
And I think not make a big deal about setbacks. Like one of the things we say is like and this has become quite popular in the world we live in of social, right? Every failure doesn't have to be a LinkedIn post, right? I mean, it's okay. I mean, sometimes stuff happens, you've not showed up at your best. Just keep moving, right? Because if you try to overthink every failure and try to extract some value out of it, you're just confusing yourself.
Yeah. I think the negative impact of a setback is much lesser than the negative impact of harping over that setback.
Yeah, just get on with it.
And maybe building even a victim mindset. One of the biggest joys of mentorship, at least for me, is to see transformative journeys, right? To see somebody in a position and reflect that you've had a small part to play in that journey. I'm sure you've had many over your careers, but if there's any particular journey where you think disproportionate delta was driven in that individual's life by following the principles that you have put down in Head Start as well. We would love to hear that story.
So you have a couple of great examples.
Yeah,
So,
look, I mean, I think disclaimer, I think it'll be naive to say we were the cause of that delta. Of course, they were demonstrating those principles already, which is why they feature in the book. But one specific example is of a gentleman called Prasad Magnama, who was my head of marketing in a previous organization when I was leading the country in Sri Lanka. And young person out of a business school, one of the leading business schools in Sri Lanka, and thinking about a global career, right? And I think some of the things that he did really well. We have a section called Be a Boss Magnet. And Prasad, I'm sure he will watch this, was and is a boss magnet, right? And he would do something super interesting. He would reach out to me, and he was obviously doing with me as a leader, but he was doing this with other leaders as well, and set up these 30-minute monthly catch-ups, and he would call them no agenda check-in, right? And it took me a while to even appreciate it because I'm used to everybody coming with an agenda, saying, being very structured and saying, this is what I want from this conversation. And it's usually about, hey, can you be my mentor? Can you be my sponsor? One of those things, right? And he had the confidence to come and say, hey, you know what? I just wanted to check in. I don't want to show you my progress. I don't want to ask you what my next steps are. I just want to talk to you. And he would always finish the conversation with, Sundar, what can I do for you? Right? Here's somebody, in the organizational sense, sort of junior, asking a more senior leader, how can I help you? What can I do for you? That just tells me the self-assurance the individual has. And that's now my advice, learning from Prasad. That's my advice to all the younger people. And I'm doing it now with my senior leaders. So if I meet somebody on the board, if I meet my chief exec, I am trying to finish the conversation by saying, hey, is there anything I can do for you? Right? So that whole mindset of there is a give, even if you're starting out. It's not always about a get. Right? And he got a get. Today he runs large commercial operations based out of the company's headquarters in London. Fantastic journey from Colombo to London. And of course, he did a lot of other things, but just that attitude, that work ethic, just that ability to constantly add value. And he features in our book as well. So.
No, I think one of the things that one can take away from the book as well as your general advice is how small things stack up, right? As young professionals especially, and I can reflect on my own journey also, you always wanted to do the big thing.
Yeah.
I'll get that one big project and I'll hit it out of the park.
Look,
because
everybody gets the big things right. That's the thing.
and we talk about this in the book, right? I think the power of compounding, we know how powerful that can be. And a lot of our book is all about doing the small stuff right. It's the small micro changes which actually lead to large outcomes over time. They might be incremental, but finding a way to actually focus on the smaller things, feels less overwhelming. It gives us greater confidence. And over time, you can work on the bigger things as well. But I think to me, getting the smaller pieces right, the power of small wins is far more underestimated, I think.
Right. Super. Thank you so much for being here at the Altera Institute. All of our students have read your book, The Head Start. Who else should?
No, go for it.
No, I think, ultimately the book is designed for young professionals. So I'm really hoping that young professionals benefit from it. But for people who are also slightly older, like our generations also, a lot of us are in roles where we are guiding the next generation. And we're hoping that book also provides a very useful guide to other generations as well, along with a few useful pointers that hopefully each of us can apply. And we've had lots of people who are much older saying, I wish we had this book when we were younger, but there are 3 or 4 takeaways that I want to apply in my own lives as well. And that's very gratifying to hear.
That's very powerful to hear. Thank you so much for sharing your learnings with the students here.
Thank you.
And with the world. Thank you for all the advice.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aalekh. Good luck.
Thank you.